Good day, everyone, and welcome back from the break. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the next MedWeek workshop, Recruiting with Purpose. It's no secret that many businesses are struggling to find and retain employees, and recruitment and retention practices have massively shifted, leaving business leaders often struggling to keep up with those changes. Today's conversation will center around business owners and leaders to share what's working and what's not. To facilitate this discussion, we are joined by amazing individuals from Kinesis, a Portland, Oregon B Corporation that believes there's no greater engine of prosperity, opportunity, and equity than locally owned businesses. And they love nothing more than helping small businesses unleash their potential for growth. I'd like to introduce you to your primary guide, Jeff Wester. Jeff is a strategist at Kinesis with over a decade of experience helping clients think strategically about marketing, branding, and growth. He works with clients to help them accomplish their goals, whether it is to identify how they are differentiated from their competition, to finding a pathway for reaching their objectives, or how to communicate the elements that matter most. A little fun fact about Jeff, one of the ways that he spends his spare time is building prop replicas from sci-fi movies. It's my pleasure now to turn you over to Jeff to take you on this Recruiting with Purpose journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be a part of this conversation today. Just stoked to be in this environment. Love organizations like this and groups like this. I'm going to go ahead and start right away in our little presentation. You saw the word workshop up there, and ideally when we do this kind of thing, we've typically done it with more kind of like a roundtable environment. We can all chime in. So we've adjusted some things. If you have questions or comments that come up throughout, feel free to pop them in the chat and they'll be communicated over to me. We'll try to leave some time at the end to answer those questions as we go through this. All right. Well, as was said, my name's Jeff and I am a part of Kinesis. And also, as you heard, I'm a strategist there. I'm also the creative director. And we are a business consultation firm focused on catalyzing the success of locally owned small businesses. We think that they have the greatest potential for impact in their communities. They're often closer to the people on their teams, closer to the communities around them. We know that the money spent at these businesses often stays in the economy of that community and circulates, whereas in other instances it may not. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to catalyze success in ways that really create an impact. And honestly, those companies often just don't get enough relevant help. Oftentimes we get business advice that really is distilled down from multinational corporations that have thousands of employees across many campuses. And that information is not always like very relevant to like a machine shop in Southern Oregon with like 100 people. And so we do a lot of work to try to demystify business success, get past some of the mythology about what good business practices look like, so that these small businesses, these purpose-driven companies can really grow and thrive in meaningful ways and cause impact in their communities. We like to say that we're in the business of transformation because many of the companies that we work with are at a growth state or at an inflection point. Oftentimes, growth brings transformation to an organization. So maybe they're trying to scale their team up and they want to maintain their culture, or they're at an inflection point like transferring ownership or exploring company ownership on a team level. But fundamental change like that can be very difficult. And so having a partner to bring strategic focus is very helpful. It's also how we affect change in the world. We're on this mission of transformation, and specifically on a mission to transform work. Work is an important part of all of our lives. It's one of the main reasons we're here today, and it can be better. I think we really believe that work experiences, work life can be more diverse, can be more engaging and inclusive. And the time to start thinking about that and talking about that is now. Like, here we are. You may have noticed out in the news a lot of noise about what people are calling the workforce crisis. Places that used to be entry-level positions are now trying to hire people with $200 signing bonuses. Anecdotally, we can start to see this all over the place. One of my children has a friend in high school who's been working at Burger King, and they've been sent home multiple times just because they can't staff a full shift and already working on reduced hours. And so, there's no wonder there's a lot of noise about this crisis, about how it's going to impact the larger economy and what it's doing to businesses. And we definitely see it. We definitely understand that it's going on. But what's interesting is that with many of our clients, with many of the people we're working with, the crisis hasn't been the same for them. We haven't seen the same attrition rates. We haven't seen the same struggle of people trying to find and attract talent. And so we want to kind of share some success stories that we've seen that kind of spark some inspiration for you about what might be working, and kind of get into some ideas about why this is all happening and what we can do about it. First, I want to share with you a little bit is this company that we work with called Loop. Here they are a couple of years before the pandemic, when there was this very small team that we started working with. And Loop is a team of automation engineers. They work on some of the most dynamic and amazing robots in the world. But even though that they're a automation company, the owner, David Nichols, seen sitting here, really understood that what was at the heart of their success was the people on the team, that it was these revolutionary engineering minds that were creating unique problem-solving methods no one else was doing. And while the rest of the industry is focusing around the capabilities of their technology, Loop decided to lead a revolution around people. This industry is notoriously hard to recruit, especially at the size that Loop is, because the better the talent is, the higher the pay goes. And usually they're even willing to fly an American engineer to go live in Germany to do the job. And so it's really difficult for a company of this size to compete on finances. And so they've chosen really to double down on purpose. You can see on the back wall here, revolutionary improvement, minimal viable bureaucracy. There's actually 5 other values that they've put into a mural on their wall. They've created this internal practice where they learn how to play and discover new techniques together. And they're also trying to do their part to break open this industry that's also been very hard to break into in terms of diversity. There's something about that automation engineering spectrum of work that's been an incredibly hard area to get through to. And so what we're seeing is that investment in people in the long game of trying to create a revolutionary place for people to work has really been paying off. This is a chart that they released recently just to show how the growth scale has been going at their company. And even during this time of this supposed crisis where people are really struggling to find people, they're actually scaling up quite well and finding top talent who are dying to come work for them because they see something a little different going on at Loop. It's creating better opportunities than we could even foresee. And sometimes there's this implication that when we're talking about these things, we're just talking about these kind of tiers of engineer level hiring jobs, or that's really restricted to maybe a white collar environment. But we also work with companies like Pratt & Larson. Pratt & Larson, you may have seen them around. They have a big sign on one of their buildings down by the waterfront. And they make some of the most beautiful and sought after handmade tile in the world. Their tile ships out to jobs all over the world. Customers like Robert Downey Jr. Decorate their houses with this tile. And what's interesting is that they understand that even though they make this beautiful product, it's not what really sets their company apart. It's not the thing that's really making it dynamic. What's really working for them are these people. They have, here in the center, you see Belle and Anthony, and they have actually been working as employees at Pratt & Larson for over 21 years and actually volunteered to buy the company in an effort to share the good with this team of people. They realized that what made Pratt & Larson great was that they had accumulated all of these alchemists and magicians and artists who just love tile so much. They have a 12-step process, and their building is set up in 3 stories in one building. So all these people are in the same building, passing tile from hand to hand. And it's really a unique process because each piece of tile touches 12 different stations. So every person here touches each piece of tile. Most of them never see the finished product, but they're deeply invested in each other. They're deeply invested in their culture, and it's making a huge difference. And they hire from the ground up. Their typical hiring channel is in the shipping department. They're looking for people to pack boxes and to stack things and to move things around. but they have a great mechanism for bringing those people into the community and making them feel a part of it and spreading the love so that they start to grow and thrive within that place. They do lots of interesting, fun stuff. They're often working with, people who have little to no English speaking skills. And so they'll often bring in translators for company team meetings. They've also brought in translators for sign language because they have a number of people on their team who don't have a hearing. And so they're constantly doing these things to try to create this kind of equitable environment for everyone, including a daily yoga practice they make available to everybody, which results in some really fun and funny photography. And they've really understood that if they're going to go forward through the pandemic, if they're going to go forward in the business future, they need to start investing in who these people are and the environment, and that they kind of also realize that's what they were doing already. And so bringing that to bear and making that a point of focus was something that's really paid off for them. And recently, they even went as far as to making their own location a COVID vaccination destination because they realized there were a number of people who weren't going to be able to have access. And so in order to make it the most equitable experience for everybody, they brought it on site. People were able to bring their families and their children to this event. And it really positioned them well to go through the pandemic, where they were able to practice all the best safety protocols and not have to shut down or lay anyone off throughout this experience. When we look at these companies who are living sort of antithetically to the crisis, who are not being kind of blown down by this trouble, this difficulty trying to get out there and find people, the through line that we're seeing is that they're companies that have decided to approach things from a kind of a human-centric point of view. They're really putting people at the center of everything they do. And so to us, what we are starting to understand is that this isn't necessarily a crisis. Even though difficult things are happening, we see this as an opportunity. This is a time where we're seeing a movement come about, and it's a movement to transform work. The pandemic has undeniably presented us with challenges. It's also brought enough disruption to create opportunity for real change. And instead of trying to see this as a crisis where we're going to just flip a switch and get back to the way things were, the real opportunity ahead of us is to explore what things could be, because I think if we look at how things have gone, we're not actually that excited to get back to the way things were, the assumptions of our business societies. In our work together, the reason this is important to us is because as we've worked with company after company, what we found is that even though there's really a multitude of data points to help you get an understanding of what's going on with your business and help you see into your business, the one thing that matters the most, that really brings business success to any business, is employee engagement. And that is a term we hear a lot. In fact, I see engage right up here on the screen above my head. We understand this. We know that there is a need to engage our employees, to create human experiences for them. But I fear sometimes it can kind of verge into ubiquity. And it's important to note that what we're finding is that study after study after study is showing us that engaged employment, that people who have an engaged workforce, are actually experiencing overall improvement and in the whole performance of the company in ways that you wouldn't even expect. So for example, companies with engaged employees are experiencing up to 22% higher profitability off of doing the same work. Those same companies are experiencing 21% higher productivity, which means people are getting more done with less time with no other changes than trying to just engage with the employee set. A big one worth paying attention to, especially in the state of Oregon, where there's a lot of machine shops and a lot of manufacturing, is that there's, in an engaged workspace, there's 48% fewer safety incidents. A safety incident is huge. It's a very costly experience. And so the idea that you can engage your team and then that can reduce your safety incidents by nearly half is actually a pretty impressive data set. Along with that, we see 41% fewer quality defects. Things aren't coming back for returns or processing through shipping and trying to problem solve and send repairs out. And also 37% lower absenteeism. And this is what we're experiencing with the companies we've been working with, is people aren't leaving those companies. They're not trying to get out of them as fast as possible. And so in every way that matters, we can clearly see that in every way that matters to the success of any company, investing in an inclusive and diverse culture is the best commitment people can make. It's not just some feel-good experience, even though it does feel good. It's also good business sense. It's kind of the secret of success if you're willing to go down that road. And I think it's really important to point this out because there's kind of an old world mythology about business that says that anything you do, we call it doing the right thing. Anything you do to help people in your company is going to ultimately come as a cost to the business. It's going to be something you invest in order to satisfy your inner needs, but it's not exactly going to pay out for the company. But we can see here that it absolutely does, and it absolutely has for a long time. And the problem is, the reason we don't want to go backwards is because even though we can clearly see, and we're opening up our eyes to this idea that engaging our employees is good for everybody, even though we know that, statistically, as American employers, we've been very poor at it, and very poor at it for a long time. For pretty much 21 years, the employee engagement number has been almost static, and it's leveling out now, even in 2021, at 36%. Right? So what that means is that out of everyone who has a job right now, only 36% of them want to be there. And if we flip that number over, it gets kind of depressing. It means that 64% of Americans hate their job. They're disengaged with their job. And it's an easy thing to see. I mean, we can see it everywhere. We all have experiences because statistically, hating your job is now the norm. We don't talk about them as opportunity scapes like we used to. We start to talk about them as a thing you have to do to make money. And that's really a sad state. And I think it's an opportunity for us. And what's happening right now in terms of people leaving their jobs, they're giving up careers they built themselves, sometimes with nothing to support them. They're looking around for this new kind of greener pasture, is that for a long time, we've told people it's worth it. If you just endure this for the paycheck, everything's going to turn out okay. But minds are changing about that. And in large degree, because the pandemic is amplifying everything. We're more networked than we ever have. Here I am, and you're seeing my living room. No one sees my living room, because there's a camera in my house. We're able to see when parents are not supported and their kids are everywhere in the background. We're able to see when a person is dominating a conversation, and so this insight into how things are going is opening our eyes, and it's really catching up to poor employment. Even people like Ellen DeGeneres on the national news are getting called out because people just don't have any patience anymore for people treating people like that. And this old notion that you can put up with it in order to go forward, and that's the way, it needs to just go away. And you don't have to look very far to feel the support that the work. I mean, everywhere on the internet, you see this sentiment almost every day. Things I hate about my job: getting out of bed, people working. When your boss comes around the corner and you grab the closest thing to you to make it look like you're working. When people ask how I handle this job, I'm dead inside. And these are funny, and they instantly connect to us because we've had these experiences. I haven't always worked at this wonderful place called Kinesis where they're doing these amazing things. My career path is one of overcoming obstacles. I've had some really interesting jobs that have been really bad and really almost traumatic. And I think there are a lot of people who are almost being traumatized by the history of their work. And that's largely in part because way back in the Industrial Revolution, we all started to buy into this mechanistic idea, this misunderstanding that people can be managed better as machines, that the priority of the machine is more important than each individual part. And so similar to kind of like this org chart, we reduce people to roles. We say things like people are our best asset. And we believe in these philosophies that say when a person isn't working out in the role, replace the person with a person who will work out. But there's so many problems with that methodology, too many for me to go into today, to be honest with you. But largely, the main problem is that it's not accepting the humanity of the people involved. I don't fit into a box. I'm more round shaped. And I don't know anyone else who fits into a box. Organizations don't fit into a box. They're more like organisms. People don't clearly fit a single role. And so if we want to embrace our own humanity at work, we want to see a place where we can actually be humans at work, we need a new way of thinking about how to do this. And these are the systems that got us into these messes. We can't look upon them to help us get out of them. And so racing to try to end the crisis with some kind of a best practice is missing this opportunity to break away from this inflexible system and start to get into new ideas about what we might do to improve the health and resiliency of our companies. It's for that reason that we need more than just a tip or trick to fix our systems. We need to engage ourselves in new creative thinking because what we're really up against is the unknown and things aren't changing back. And so we need to start asking ourselves, what does the future of work look like? What does the future of being an employer look like? What does it look like to own a business? Why does my business exist? We call this recruiting with purpose because we're finding that while people will leave one company for another company, if the whole purpose of that company is making money, I mean, in a way, when you say, hey, if our purpose is making money, then when that person gets paid something more to go somewhere else, they're actually living up to your purpose. But if you can actually get people to rally behind a purpose that goes above financial gain, it goes above all of these things, you see these opportunities where brave leaders start to try new things, and it starts to help things over and over again. So a good example of that we're seeing out in the marketplace, besides some of the ones that I showed you earlier, we have some examples of things we've seen out into the world. I believe most of you probably heard of this gentleman, Dan Price, but not because his company is that remarkable. He runs a company called Gravity Payments. What they do is they process credit card payments at POS systems in like grocery stores and gas stations. Not the most revolutionary thing that you've ever experienced, but he made a big splash years ago because he announced that he was going to start paying everyone in his company a minimum of $70,000 a year across the board. This had huge media earthquake ramifications, and many economists came out to say this is just a ploy. He's trying to get attention. This will never work, and a company cannot survive. When it exists that way. But Dan Price didn't believe that. He doubled down on his commitment and continued to pay his companies well, even to this day. And the part of the story that doesn't often get shared is that he got hit really hard during the pandemic. As I said, his business takes place at POS systems, and those things disappeared almost overnight in many places. And the business advice he got from all the economists around him was, Dan, it's time for you to stop this 70,000 a year shenanigans, and it's time for you to lay some people off in order to protect your company. But because he had already flipped the script and created a more human environment, he actually went to his teams and engaged them in the problem. Instead of coming to them as the boss and saying, hey, I need to fire 50 of you so that we can maintain payroll, he came to them and said, hey, team, together we're in this situation. We're in this tough spot. I need your help figuring out how we're going to get through it. And the team came forward with their own ideas. Many of them volunteered to take voluntary pay cuts. Many of them volunteered to go on furlough or on, they would take turns working through the week. But they started to embrace new ideas, creativity, and they found a way through it. The result was he didn't have to lay anyone off. He was able to bring all those people back. And when things started opening up at POSs again and people could actually pay credit card payments at those spots, his business started booming because he's one of the only businesses that had a staff to support the need of those customers. And so the long-term ongoing payoff has been good because he decided to do the right thing for his humans, for his people in his company. We see some of that good all the time, even in Kinesis. I like to kind of tell people that Kinesis to me is like a grand experiment. We're always trying new things to see how we can engage our team and see how we can keep them kind of giving their best self and showing up as their best self every day. When the pandemic hit, we had a number of parents on the team, and we also had what suddenly became an empty office building. And so to kind of kill two birds with one stone, or to kind of try multiple options at once, we ended up opening a school in our office. And so many of the parents, myself included, on the team were able to bring our children here. We hired a teacher. We created a safe zone where the kids were distant from each other. They had to wear masks. And we gave them the opportunity to learn with a tutor. And so, instead of counting on our parents to suddenly be homeschool parents and then also show up as their full selves at work, we tried to create some support systems for them so they wouldn't have to go through those situations. And that really was our motivation. Our real goal was to try to do something for these kids who clearly were just going to be stuck in their house all day. Maybe they can get out and do a little something extra, but also, how can we keep people engaged? It's difficult when you're having to take care of childcare needs to do that. And we're even seeing that now as childcare is becoming a huge issue in trying to get these people supported in work. And what I mean about the payoff happening, the goodwill payoff happening long term, is that even though mission accomplished, our goal was to support our team and make a school, that happened. What also happened, though, was we started getting attention for this effort that we weren't even trying to get. The New York Times found out about the school, and so they featured us in this article that led to some really goodwill online, as well as people reaching out to us about potentially working with us, both as customers and new recruits, people wanting to join the team. And that benefit, that goodwill, has gone just so deeply beyond what we've actually invested in it that it's way more than paid for itself in terms of what we've invested into the company, and we're thriving better because we made that effort. And so as we look ahead, I think as we go forward, when we're trying to recruit people, we're trying to retain people, we can't just treat it as an external expression of communication. We have to understand that work is not going back. The future of work is human. We believe that the movement that's going forward is a human-centered movement. It's a movement of companies that are wanting to create unique, remarkable places where people want to show up and work, and they want to put their best self forward. This has been a passion of mine for quite a long time because I work with creatives. Creativity is a unique field of work where these people who show up, they can't deny themselves their humanity and actually produce good work. They have to be imaginative. They have to be creative. They have to be expansive. They have to be emotional. And so you have to adopt unique ways of approaching them in order to create that environment. And what I'm seeing is that unique approach is the opportunity in front of us right now is to start extending that unique approach to all the humans in our work. What if someone getting pregnant wasn't the end of their career? What if there was opportunity for people who got sick to continue to benefit and thrive? What if we could actually take care of people, and that by doing that, we are taking care of our businesses, which are human-centric businesses? I'm actually excited about this future. I understand we're in a tough spot. We've been in a time of uncertainty and a time of disruption, but I'm also excited because the people who care are stepping forward and really pushing forward the future of work. Thank you. I'm going to turn off my screen share now. And yeah, thank you. Went rather fast. As I said, this is usually more of like a Q&A kind of environment, and kind of looking here to see if anybody had any questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple of comments actually, Jeff. Thank you so much, first of all, for that wonderful presentation. Stephanie Dance looks like she agrees with me about it being a wonderful presentation. She says, this is an awesome presentation. Will there be a copy of it available to attendees?
I'm happy to pass along my notes and slides if that will help you in bringing humanity to your workplace. I'd love to support you.
Right. Yes. Just say yes. Perfect. Yes. We did also have another question from Laura Corey. She says, so what ways can the employer change to bring their employees alive?
Oh, that's a great question.
It is.
I can kind of come back to my statement at the end there about leading creative people. I think having that perspective has shown me for a long time that there are some like built-in mechanistic business systems that just get in the way of people becoming their best self, showing up as their best self. So some of the easy stuff we can do is like talk to your people. You look at the Dan Price example. He didn't try to like figure everything out before he talked to them. Often what you find is that the people who have the best ideas for how to improve a process, the best ideas how to push things forward, are the people who are doing the work on the ground every day. They have great ideas. They're applying their best creativity sometimes to the problem. And so sometimes it's the easiest thing is just to start engaging them. But in a deeper way, one thing that you can really do, I don't have enough time to really dig into this deeply, but we spend a lot of time working with companies on what we call their brand foundations. What is your mission? What is your set of values? And what is the vision you're pursuing? When we say recruiting with purpose, if you don't know your purpose, what can you call people to? And we know that, values have been somewhat ubiquitous and kind of end up as posters on the wall. But if you actually think of a value set as a decision-making landscape, how do I make decisions while I'm at work? Then it changes. And engaging your team around what matters most to you, what is your mission, what are you here to do, and trying to provide opportunity for them to feedback of how they can contribute to that mission is awesome. And unfortunately, many, many businesses are built the other way, where the people are actually told, here's what you have to do. And so when you give them the opportunity to contribute, they most often go, well, just tell me what to do, because we've traumatized people from stepping up and taking initiative.
Thank you, Jeff. Those great answers. We have another question from Lanisha McMillan, who asks, is the school system only for people who work?
That's a great question. The school program that we put together was really meant to support the people on our team. We didn't open the doors necessarily to like the general public or anything. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's an interesting idea. At the time, we definitely could not tackle the infrastructure needed to create something like a daycare environment. And what really made this work well was that the school system itself had provided kids with computers and a curriculum. And so what we really just needed was someone to kind of be there and oversee them, answer questions. And in that model, it's not that difficult to replicate. I mean, we didn't have to pay a person that much to do this role, and the impact on the company was monumental. I mean, we couldn't have gone forward the way we did if the people who had this need couldn't give us their full attention.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like I mean, you saw a need within your organization, and then you took the time to fill that need. And at the same time, that, as you said, that goodwill that was put out there, that ended up being extremely good for your business, not only in the short term, but in the longer term, right? So doing good is a good thing, people. We have another question from Lee Fleming, who asks, what recommendations do you have for public agencies and organizations with unionized workforce?
Yeah, that's an interesting. Thank you for that question. These are great questions. That is an interesting question. It can provide some difficulty. Fundamentally, it's a complicated landscape, but at an idea level, I think unions actually kind of formalized originally and existed to kind of protect the rights of the people who work at these organizations. And so if you can clearly communicate that you're on their team, that your goal is to create a remarkable workplace for them to be, then you can kind of start to partner better with those organizations. The challenge becomes when they're not values aligned with your organization. And unfortunately, you don't have any control over that. But you do have control over how you interact with the people on your team every day. And so in terms of engagement, one thing that does tend to happen in unionized environments, and this is kind of anecdotal, just in my experience, is that there does kind of become this us versus you mentality that, like, I'm just here to do the work, and these people over here in the union are with me just doing the work. And so, hardline environments don't tend to create those kind of like cohesive circumstances. So again, engagement, a lot of times, the definition of it is something that holds my attention. Is this a cool place to work? Do people want to do the tasks? And I think oftentimes, even in those unionized environments where the crowd is controlled, if we're doing our best work to make it an equitable environment, people will rise up to the occasion.
Thank you, Jeff. We have another question from Tracy Fisher, who asks, what first step would you recommend for a small business looking to engage employees in a more meaningful way?
Excellent. Again, excellent question. There's a ton of things you can do, but I'll say the first step, and I really do believe this, is getting tight on your mission. What are you here to do? People are drawn to purpose. They're drawn to mission. If you go back all the way to Daniel Pink's book about mission, purpose, autonomy, and mastery, if you're paying people a living wage and you're giving people an opportunity to represent autonomously, you're giving people an opportunity to put their hands on something they can gain mastery of, they'll rise to the occasion. That purpose will drive them forward. And so oftentimes a company can't afford right away to like revamp their org chart or like restructure their organization, and oftentimes don't know what they would do even if they were going to launch on that effort. And so the first thing you can do is get on the same page with everybody about what you're here to do. Why is it worth coming to work every day?
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. Just a reminder, we have plenty of time for questions and answers, so keep them coming. I guess I have one that will, myself for you, Jeff. We've talked a lot about the recruiting with purpose. Can you flip it a little bit and talk a little bit more about the retention? Like, do you have any good examples of tactics that some of your clients have ended up implementing that they've been able to then measure and say, oh, like we have a lot less turnover since we started doing X, Y, and Z?
Absolutely. Honestly, we found that a lot of the tools that you use for marketing and retaining clients are useful in marketing to and retaining employees. A client wants a dynamic experience. They want their life to be improved by connecting with you. So do the people who work with you. In terms of retention, there's lots of things you can do. So one thing is put your employee hat on. We do a lot of work with team members around an employee journey. One company that we've worked with specifically a while back created an on-ramp for the first whole year of employment. They do IT security services, and so it was pretty predictable what the career path of that person could be. And so they set it up with multiple steps where there were really human-oriented moments for the team. So the first day is all planned out, and there's not a lot of work involved. It's about orienting with the team and getting to know people. At the first month, they get like a check-in where they get to kind of tell the owner or the people what they're struggling with and how they can get better. They have stay interviews. They have all of these kind of check-ins throughout to make sure this person knows that it isn't just, hey, come here and work for us, but we're here to support your growth. We're here to support your passions as you go through this process. Other companies, like one of our favorite companies we work with, SolidForm, out of McMinnville, they've completely revolutionized their org chart. Often these kind of old school hierarchical systems don't actually reflect how things get done or how people advance and move around in an organization. There's tons of perverse incentives, or people will try to just change a position to get a little more money or whatever. And so he created an org chart where it's not linear, it's circular. And at the center is the mission, like what they're all about. And so the closer a person gets to the mission, that actually translates to them being in a more leadership role. And it also maps how they can transfer their job throughout the company to go to different places. So maybe they're a fabricator and they want to become an engineer. Here are the steps it would take for you to get there. Or if you want to become the best fabricator, here are the steps you can take to get there. So oftentimes engaging that empathy muscle, kind of like you would do for your customers, how can we create this experience for our teams every day so that they can really show up as their best selves?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself again.
No problem.
Thanks so much. You might have heard my phone ring earlier. I apologize for that. I guess I'm back in the office, as you can see, and sometimes my phone rings. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Empathy definitely has a lot to do with it. I also am curious, like on the flip side, like have you ever encountered an experience, maybe it's not one of your clients, but like anecdotally where people run into certain pitfalls, like maybe somebody says that they actually really want to create this experience, but there's something going on, whether it's personal with them or something in the organization that's preventing them from being successful that you could talk about?
Yeah, I mean, every organization is kind of its own ecosystem. And I do think that sometimes best intentions get dominated by kind of misunderstandings. I love to tell stories. So I'll just tell you a story from my own past. Like one of the earliest business practices that I remember learning way back in the day, I used to be a salesman at Circuit City before they shut down. It's kind of how I got started in my work career. And I was selling, Walkmans at the time. There's the CD Discman for the young crowd before MP3 players.
I was going to say, you just dated yourself, man.
So I remember I had a really cool manager at the time. I really respected this person. And they would come to me and they would try to like help with my career and try to help me to learn how to advance. And I remember there was a day where Circuit City had put an ad out for like a $12 Discman, which was really cheap at the time. The problem was that in our store, we had a total of 2. And so as people were flooding into the place to get them, we were getting more and more frustrated because we just didn't have anything close to that price to offer anybody. And I didn't have any power over the products. And so this rose to a point where one person came in and they were angry with me about this. They were so mad. I was trying so hard to help them. I felt really out of touch and out of place. And at one point they were like, let me talk to your manager. And I remembered having so much respect for this person that I couldn't wait. I was like, oh, I can't wait for them to come in and tell you how it is. And instead he came and he told me how it was. He was like, Jeff, like right in front of this person, Jeff, you're not really doing a good job of helping this customer. And he like went over and beyond, helping this customer, which was, great. They made the sale, they sold something really cheap. But in the long run, that had a huge negative impact on me. Because it was the first time in a long series of times where what was communicated to me was that the customer was always right. And that this is like this weird perspective we've had out in the world where somehow while you're at work, you don't have agency here, that your perspective isn't the one we want to hear. And there's all of these weird communications going on all the time that the humans in the experience aren't welcome in this place. In terms of navigating those kind of circumstances yourself, or trying, like, I don't know if I answered your question, but I'll kind of circle back. What happens when you're in an organization and there's like an obstacle? And sometimes that obstacle is a person or a perspective or a policy, and you don't have the power to change it. And you do have the power over your own, mindset, and you do have the power of community. Who can you connect to who is not just to complain about this, but if you're going to show ownership, can you team up with them on creating a solution that you can pass upstream, to your boss? Oftentimes, some of these frustrations really come from people trying to do the right thing. They notice something's wrong. They notice something's inefficient. They're not coming from it as I'm trying to do as least as I can. And so how do we create systems in our companies where those people can run those things upstream, and where people internally, if they don't have those systems, can you come together with anyone else to help you put something like that together?
Yeah, I know. I'll confess that, like internally, like we're a fairly large organization. We've got a lot of diversity, a lot of different, needs, wants. And one of the things that we are constantly trying to figure out is how we can better engage our employee group. We actually have our own culture committee. So, we're constantly talking through these different mechanisms that we can employ to try and connect with each of the individuals. And again, everybody likes different things. We did get another question from the audience. It is, what can managers maybe we already said this. What can managers and public agencies do to motivate our individual departments and create a team environment?
Oh, I love this question. This is like my favorite question, because the truth is that one of the reasons we're so focused on humans right now is because humans are powerful. We have this weird idea that everything comes from the top down, but actually, personally, I bring transformation in every environment that I go into. I know that you do too. And so, you can see examples where when I was for example, as a creative director, I've always been in charge of a division or a department a little separate from the rest of the company, maybe even has its own unique skill set. And maybe the ownership isn't on board, maybe the whole company isn't on board with humanity, but can you be on board with humanity in the people you affect a difference with? What can you do in the places where you do have control to open up and create opportunities? And one really important thing is, how can you shine a light on what those changes are doing for you and your team so that the people around you can see the good, right? Can you share, like, we had a much harder time doing the work until we instituted this policy in our own team. We want to just share that with you all. Right? We had this interpersonal conflict. Here's how we solved it. And we think we've uncovered a framework that might work for other people who have conflict in the company. And so part of it is kind of have to put yourself out there. But really what we like to say is create an environment where things are safe to try, right? Like, can we create environments where people have some realm of experimentation? Everywhere that you see that going on, people are feeding back with like really positive results, even at the largest level at a place like Google. But I actually think that management teams and who traditionally, managers have had a very hard time in current business structures because they're kind of between everybody, but they also have this really great opportunity to create human welfare in their teams and to really become an advocate. For example, one thing we make regular recommendation to at almost any company is that most companies have something like a performance review that is kind of a top-down review of how are you meeting the metrics that we've established for you. And at its core, the misappropriation of that effort is that we believe we know what you should be doing best. That we from the top really understand what every person on the team should be doing. But if you've ever been in a chain of command, that's not true. So
I don't know what you're talking about, Jeff. No, I've never seen that happen. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. So much yes. Yeah, and that, just by the way, that last question was from Kimberly Sutton. So thank you, Kimberly, for that question. We have another question from Cody Trudell, who asks, has Kinesis discovered any ways to shore up extra funds that maybe aren't conventional to help with additional resources and creative ideas?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Because I think one of the, we talk a lot about change. And one of the things we run into with change is like, I don't have a budget for that. Like, I've never budgeted for marketing, or maybe I've never budgeted for recruiting, or I've never budgeted for branding. And so like, there are these kind of fixed structures, and these companies are trying to create year-long budgets. Everything gets kind of fixed. I don't have like a secret sauce around shoring up those resources. What I usually like to see is, can we investigate ways in which we're dumping money into this problem without knowing it, right? So the easiest one I can think of is that usually a company that is not budgeting for marketing is spending money on marketing. They're spending money on sending their owner out to talk at organizations. They're spending money on salespeople knocking on doors. But if they were to spend some of that money on marketing, reallocate a fraction of it, they would actually get better results from those efforts with less human effort. Sometimes we don't have the funding to really approach like an infrastructure change, but we often are imagining it has to be a big change. How can we empower people to take action on little changes and improvements that we bring along the way? Those things are really interesting. It can be difficult to just suddenly manifest a gigantic budget. So I see your point. But often what happens is, as you start to make the changes, you start to realize that this is a better investment, that by investing in the culture and the humanity of these people, which can take time, is paying me back way more.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I see at my own organization, like everybody here loves swag. Who doesn't love swag, right? Like we've got, I'll show you my example, everybody's into well, you probably can't see it with my lighting, but everybody's into the Yetis these days. So, that was something simple that we got. And yet, it seems like swag is a great thing, but often for short-term gains. So, like what other things can you do? And we do a lot of volunteering, for example, and that, again, that's that goodwill. It feels great. What other things have been out there that you would recommend that businesses consider? And I like the volunteering, for example, because it's something that is really inexpensive that any organization can engage in, no matter your scale. So do you have a few other examples you might be able to offer?
Oh yeah. And I think what you're hitting on is right on, because, again, just to contrast the bad acting we've seen a lot of times is that people will try to create a sense of purpose by telling you what the company is doing on their behalf. We're donating this much money to this many people. We're doing these efforts. But what actually is more impacting is when the people in that organization can do something for themselves. So like on the easiest side, you mentioned volunteering. One of the things that our company has done every year is do a volunteer day with Habitat for Humanity, because there's something about hammering a nail with my hand into the wall, right? There's actually a build we worked on down the street from my house. I drive by it at least twice a week, and every single time I look over at it and I'm thrilled to see the people walking around in the little neighborhood. So there's something that kind of feeds back to me out of that effort. And so a lot of those volunteer efforts where you can actually get hands-on and volunteer is great. Another thing that tends to get missing from volunteerism is how what I actually do can contribute, to the situation. And it is a bigger ask and often takes a lot of like creative budgeting, but we even see like creative agencies offering pro bono work to nonprofits, or sometimes you can create a customer arrangement with a nonprofit or an organization you really believe in. You can tell they need help, that kind of help you can provide, but maybe they can't afford that help. And so, you could give them money, or you can offer like a half-priced service, or like create some kind of an arrangement with them. And oftentimes, if you actually approach your team members in those efforts, they're thrilled to jump into that work, because oftentimes they can't feel the impact, no matter how connected they are to the purpose.
Your project,
it's hard to feel the impact of your work if you're in any kind of enterprise or kind of chain of command. So yeah, anything you can do to bring tangible connection to people is great. We've done a number of other things too, like actually crowdsourcing ideas from people on the team who have pet passion projects or things that they're interested in helping out with. That also helps out a lot, is because sometimes they'll come forward and say, hey, there's an organization out here. A couple of weeks ago, one of our team members let us know that there was an organization of people of color having like a fair in Portland, and like a bunch of our team members got to go. And it's a great opportunity to bring exposure to these efforts that are going out there.
I love all of these, Jeff. Thank you so much, because I know that Habitat for Humanity, what you're saying, it's like, yeah, there's definitely something to getting into that experience. And I mean, it's therapeutic. You didn't use that word, but I was like, yeah, hammering. I was like, I'm frustrated right now about this, and I'm frustrated about this, and I'm frustrated about that one. I was like, bring me the sledgehammer. I need some therapy. But you're doing, I jest, but you're doing some good. And yeah, that physical labor aspect is something that I think we kind of minimize a little bit more, but it is really helpful. And like great points too about the fact that we all have skills that we have that we can volunteer ourselves. And yes, sometimes that is more time intensive. But you can find ways to work on things. You can always volunteer at a nonprofit yourself on a board, for example. So, there are lots.
In a lot of ways, you end up having more impact from that perspective sometimes if you have the time to volunteer for a board or to kind of work on one of those organizations. You get a lot of hands-on experience in those moments.
For sure. Well, we have another question for the audience. I believe this one comes from Dr. Stephen Nakana. Each industry is experiencing a mass exodus of employees, and we also know that folks of color have been severely impacted by COVID, and most are leaving or have left the workforce. How can organizations create accountability regarding retention and workforce engagement, and how can data be used to inform decisions?
What a great question. That is so deep.
Dr. Nakana is deep, if you know.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head, and something about the way you answered this question makes me think you have a perspective on this. I would love to hear you share at some point. But a couple of things you hit on there. First of all, that idea of accountability is really interesting and important. because it is necessary. I mean, the conversation over and over again is like carrot or stick. I definitely lean more towards the carrot mentality. If we can engage leaders in a new way of thinking about how to be leaders, that's the first step. I mean, that's the most clear path, right? And a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to engage people so that at a leadership level, at every fundamental level in the business, they understand that we're not talking about a cost. We're talking about a way to invest in the future of our company. And that's through investing in people of every persuasion, every classification. And that doesn't mean the old school, like, it doesn't matter what you look like perspective. We need to be going after people who have been impacted by these scenarios and circumstances. You mentioned data. Like, one of the things that's really interesting to me as we've been kind of trying to tackle these situations is how few people have a network that even has Black folks in it, right? Like the recruiting organizations, staffing agencies, oftentimes what happens is a top-down employer is like, hey, go find more people of color to add to the list. They have not been given the tools and they don't have the network to do that. And so in a lot of these cases, a lot of these companies are just waking up to this because of the events around George Floyd, and they're trying to scramble to kind of check the box. What is actually needed is an internal check on why we ended up in this place in the first place, right? We can't lean on those same systems to go backwards. Data is a difficult one for me. I think the level of businesses that we work in, data is tough to come by because you have to invest in it for a long time before it starts to kind of feed back to you information. And we don't have to look very hard to see that the data is showing us most of these businesses are full of white people, our own company included. And so, there's a real opportunity there. And, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how to crack that one. I think that if we were more interested in solving the problem of reaching those people and providing good to them, that would be a huge first step. And in the long run, I actually believe that for the sake of humanity, we have to awaken to the fact that businesses exist for the good of humanity, or they should not exist. And that's how we should go forward. And so we can't keep doing this to people. We can't keep creating these situations. But I admit, now's the time we need to figure that out. I don't have all the answers to that one.
Oh gosh, yeah. If only you did, Jeff. Like you would just make life so much easier, right, in this moment. But it is true. It's complicated and it's messy. And I think, when I read this, like, one of the things I'm excited about is that we're even having conversations at this point in time. These conversations were not happening just a couple of years ago, a few years ago. And I think the reality, from my opinion, is that so much of the work starts within ourselves, right? And we had a great, for those of you who were there in the session yesterday, we had a great speaker. Joy Fowler was talking about cultural competency, and that's just one component of ways that we can be exploring the ways that we can be helping not only our organizations but ourselves. And I truly, like, all that work has to come, I think, from inside ourselves. And then you have to have that passion to go out. I know you kind of asked a little bit about my perspective on accountability, retention. And, I think every organization will definitely lose some people, right? There is a natural attrition that happens year over year. And to me, it's really important to understand why. And, people give different answers. I think I hear a lot of the times, though, that people are saying that they're leaving for money. And sure, who wouldn't want to get paid more? Maybe a few people are truly leaving for that extra money aspect. But like, I know myself, like, I have stayed at places where I was going to get paid way, 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 way less because I was really, really invested in that particular company. And so when I look at those sort of things and we look at some of this data, I was like, well, that might be a reason, but that's like the convenient reason to give about why you're leaving. So I think it's really important for us to be able to dig and find resources that can actually ask those questions. Or, it can be any of us. You just have to be willing to keep asking why. And when you get deep enough in the whys, you finally start getting to the root of the real crux of what the problem was, right? So that's one of the things that I think we need to all be cognizant of, is that first answer you get, you kind of have to accept it a little bit, but that's probably not the true reason, especially, well, if somebody says it's about money.
You're
That's
making
just one
some
of those things I
excellent.
see. It's so rare that it's money.
That's
So rare.
excellent points. What you really made me think of too was in the terms of data. There is one thing I can recommend, which is like you mentioned, exit interviews. Awesome.
Mhm.
That's a great practice. It gives you a lot of data. I do agree. You need to kind of look at them closely because sometimes what ends up happening is we bury our complaints in the name of continuing to work. And when we get the opportunity to speak up because we're leaving, people will often uncork maybe 2 years old,
Right.
drama.
Yes.
What we found, what a lot of organizations were finding are doing in this space is it's kind of a mix of, you mentioned it, educating the team. I know like on our team, we did an anti-racist book club on Friday afternoons that we're going to be kicking back up again with some new material. We've seen that happening more and more. And then also stay interviews. If you want to create a data set that really gives you insight into what people are dealing with on the team and possible reasons why they may eventually leave or why they may see other people leaving, you can't just talk to them at the end. And so building those in as like a regular part of your one-on-ones and your check-ins, I think those could even replace a lot of what we do in the name of performance reviews. Because, if you already believe people are doing good work for you and you're bringing in the right kind of people, let's start empowering them instead of trying to hold them to a line. And so, just getting some
I wholeheartely agree. I mean, it's like, that perspective is incredibly important, right? It's like we forget some of the simplest things about like we focus so much on how we do better, but we forget oftentimes to focus on the things that we also do well because we don't want to lose sight of those. And so when I love the stay interview idea. Like I think some of us kind of just do it on maybe not the day-to-day, but like I know I'm typically pretty curious about my direct reports. It's like, how are things working? Are you getting what you need? But I've never like really asked deliberately, like, what keeps you here?
Right.
Like, I don't know if it's because I just haven't thought to ask that, or if I think I might feel awkward asking it, but it is.
I know there's been times I've been afraid to ask.
What keeps you here? It's the free snacks, man. It's the free snacks. It's pretty interesting. Let's see.
One last thing I can say about data, now that we've been sitting and talking about this a little bit, besides the stay interview thing, the other thing we're experimenting with is that we often are trying to help smaller businesses create data sets that are super meaningful for them around how their teams are doing, how the customers are doing, how the sales funnel is flowing. And those can be actually kind of easier to bring together in like a large enterprise company, especially if they have a lot of technology devoted to those tasks. And often what we find is that the current kind of model for gathering and evaluating data really centers on almost like a spreadsheet approach. We hear a lot of like people have come from this old school of like lead by the numbers. We're looking at profitability and revenue all the time. And so what we do a lot of work on is what are actually other data sets that will help you to understand how things are going. For example, we work on we don't work on a project model, we work on a retainer model. What that allows us to do is sometimes the work swells or drops based on the kind of work it is. The websites are much harder to bring together than like a brochure. And so depending on the time frame, we don't have to we can flex our work based on the stresses of the job, but also kind of maintain the relationship, right? And so we need to understand the emotional impact of those jobs. We need to understand what that does to our profitability and all of these things. And so we need data sets that reflect how are things going with the customer emotionally? How are things going with this team emotionally? How do people feel when they show up to work? When was the last time you saw one of your team members with a cloud over their head? Has that been happening a lot? And so, by connecting data points to things that are more human, that you can't quite see in a number is really helpful, especially if you're doing like evaluative meetings around what you can see going on in the company.
Yeah, that again underscores what you were saying about, the humans, is that there's things that a computer or a data set will not be able to tell us. Like, I can tell when somebody on my team is down. I can tell when they're having an off day, and just like they can tell, I am too, because like I'm a terrible poker face for one thing. My face is a dead giveaway, but I think it's really critical for success to, really take the time to get to know each of your coworkers. Who's your work family? I mean, that's how I look at the folks here, is that like, these are my family members, and I don't want to see anybody suffering. I want to make sure that they're in a good place. So yeah, thank you so much for that. It looks like we had a question. This one might actually be directed more towards the audience. It says, does anyone have experience with state interviews? And while people are answering that, I will ask you, Jeff, does Kinesis have experience helping companies conduct state interviews?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, lots of experience doing that. I mean, what we love to do is to help leaders have better systems for bringing the humanity forth in their organizations, really trying to help them understand that. And so state interviews is just one of the many things we help people figure out. We often help them figure out customer journey, employee journey, retention journeys, things like that. And from a strategic position, we're trying to kind of push this forward and share the good out with the world. And so, yeah, the stay interview portion has been a pretty dynamic part of our company for a long time. Yeah. And I see another comment in here. If you don't mind, I can kind of promote a thing we have coming up. If you're here and you're vibing with this stuff and you're interested in engaging with business owners and more of a dialogue around some of these things in the future, we have our Catalyst Summit is coming up. And I know Allison posted something in the chat about that. That's a great place for business owners to talk about some of the things that they're seeing. It's happening on November 12th. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I know that we're running out of time here today, so I want to thank you again so much, Jeff, for your wonderful presentation, for your engagement with me and the dialogue with the audience as well today. As Jeff said, don't miss that opportunity to join their Catalyst Summit. I'm pretty excited about that. I just got to check my calendar to see if I can do it, but if I can, you'll be seeing me.
Awesome.
And other than that, thank you so much for joining us. I think we have another short break before the next workshop, but really appreciate everyone who joined us for this one on Recruiting with Purpose. I hope that you found it super educational and that I know I've got some takeaways from this short period that we've spent with Jeff, and I couldn't be more excited or grateful to have had this opportunity. So everyone enjoy the break, and we'll see you back here in a little while.